It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Sam Lesante. Folks, for those of you who remember, author Ned Dougherty was on my show back in 2001. He wrote the book Fast Lane to Heaven. We're going to talk about this book, and we keep this in mind, it was published in March of 2001. So those of you who know Ned and have been following him, you know all about him. But for those of you who do not know him, we're going to have a good discussion. And we're going to talk about a number of things that I think are extremely important, folks. And the reason why we're doing this show is to try to educate you to what's happening November the 6th. Whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent, doesn't make any difference. All we're asking you to do is listen to the show and think a little bit. Now, Ned, first of all, thanks. Nice seeing you again.
Good to be back in Hazleton, Sam. Thanks for inviting me.
Haven't seen you in a while. You look the same.
Well, it's been since November 2011 we did several shows.
Could you imagine that?
Right, yeah.
Wow, it goes just like that. Ned, I want you to listen to something, okay? And there's a reason why I want you to listen to this.
Okay.
This was delivered by Paul Harvey in 1965. Now, folks, 1965, Paul Harvey delivered this message, and it's titled, If I Were the Devil. Andy, if you'd play that for us, please.
If I were the devil, if I were the devil, if I were the prince of darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness, and I'd have a third of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree, thee. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions, just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And what'll you bet? I couldn't get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing. Paul Harvey. Good day.
That was said in 1965 by Paul Harvey. And let me just read this to you. And again, folks, this is not political. I just want to read this to you. And we're dealing with facts. I'm sure most of you out there are just mesmerized by what Paul had to say in 1965. For the first time, And in the longest Democratic platform in history, 26,000 words, there was not a single mention of God, the Creator whom Thomas Jefferson himself, father of the party, proclaimed to be the author of our right to life and liberty. When the amendment was offered to put God back into the platform, the Democrat platform, the idea of restoring the name of God to the platform was hooted, booed, jeered by half of the Democrat delegates on the floor, who 3 times howled no. When you talk about what's happening and what Paul Harvey said and what we see in the political arena, there's no surprise. Now, in your book, Fast Lane to Heaven, okay, before I have people know who you are, I just want to show a clip, Ned, of what you said in November, and it's in the book, folks, okay? So, Andy, play this clip.
Now, the Western Hemisphere, 10 years ago, I said, the Western Hemisphere would be plagued by natural disasters, freakish, erratic, and unseasonable weather patterns, for starters, severe flooding and land erosions, tornadoes and winds, an increase in the velocity of these tornadoes and the strength of them, severe record winters, we've been having them, correct? Record heat waves, we've been having them. Severe droughts, that's something that's coming, Sam.
Now, Ned, you recall saying that, of course.
Yes, I do, Sam. Yeah.
First, I would like to have your response of what Paul Harvey said in '65.
Well, actually, I'd almost accuse Paul Harvey of plagiarizing because he seemed to be aware of the devil's plan itself. Everything that he said that the devil would want to do is part of a demonic plan that indeed the devil has done. And proof of that is that just about every accusation that Paul Harvey brought out in 1965 has been achieved by a demonic plan. But that demonic plan is even more sinister than just talking about, an entity called the devil or the demon or an evil one on the other side, because in fact, this demonic plan has been a plan of global elitists, if you will, of power brokers and leaders in this world who actually instituted all of those policies and plans since the 1960s in particular, to the point today where, I have this special relationship, I believe, with St. Michael the Archangel. And very recently, in an interior locution or a message that I received from St. Michael, he referred to a demonic possession that has actually taken over this country.
And when you see, and again, I know the politicians out there get very nervous when I do these shows because, if I'm a staunch Democrat and I'm a staunch Republican, they don't want to know this stuff. But we are paying the prices every day in society, okay? Particularly with the fact that if this current administration, if the President Obama is reelected, we're going to see probably partial birth abortions happening again. And we're going to see more abortions because he's for that. There's no question about it. Michelle Obama endorsed partial birth abortion, and I had Dr. Polidoro on one of my shows explain what it is. So when we see how sick our society is becoming, where is the outrage from the Catholics and for the people who are religious in that party, saying, wait a minute, I'm a conservative Democrat, okay? I don't believe in what that platform is. But where's the outrage that we don't see these days? From Biden, who is a Catholic, from other Catholics are on the Democrat side. Where's the outrage?
Well, Sam, it shows you how sinister the demonic plan is because we have been brainwashed by the media, by our educational system, by all of the major media influences on our lives. We're brainwashed into this concept of being pro-choice, of pro-choice somehow being an expression of our liberty. Where that is actually a twisting of what's a really core principle of being a human being, of being part of humanity. And if you were to take any individual, and take away the politics, put all of the influences aside, any individual would have to recognize that indeed life does begin at the very moment of conception. All life. Even what's very difficult for many to accept or understand or rationalize is even the event of incest or in the event of rape. A child is actually created. And in a universal sense, those of us, for example, who've had near-death experiences, we come back from those experiences with an understanding of the universal laws. The universal laws recognize the sacred relationship between our Creator, our God, and life itself. Take away the sanctity of life, what do you have left? It makes us no different than the rest of the creatures on earth if we don't respect life. So what we've seen happen, particularly since the 1960s with the sexual revolution, and then unfortunately with the Roe v. Wade decision, which made abortion the law of the land, we have subtly, and the demon little by little has whittled away the morality of this country and what we really stood for as a nation at one time, to the point that people just are brainwashed into accepting such a moral wrong. And everything else that goes along with that, you can see expressed today in the amount of violence, the drugs, and again, the most important thing, the loss of the sanctity of life.
Folks, I'm talking to Ned Dougherty, the author of Fast Lane to Heaven. Folks, this book was published, it was on the shelves, March of 2001. And one of the things that he had after he had his near-death experience, right?
Right. There were two near-death experiences, Sam, and the first one was in July 2nd, 1984. And the book actually was published in March of 2001, but copies were already in the bookstore in February 2001. And I know you want to quote from that.
Well, I just want to say this, and then we're going to go to break. In the book, fabulous book, you should definitely get the book. Number 6, while this is what he was told, while acts of terrorism and war and political unrest plague the Eastern Hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere will be spared the worst of the terrorism. However, a major terroristic attack may befall New York City or Washington, D.C., severely impacting the way we live in the United States. We'll be back right after this. Welcome to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. My guest, author Ned Dougherty. Remember, SSPTV.com 24/7. You can watch all of the shows, including all the shows they did with Ned Dougherty. Ned, in his book, Fast Lane to Heaven. Ned, you graduated from a Catholic high school. You went to a Catholic college, okay? A little bit about your life and how you got into that near-death experience.
Well, yes, Sam. I graduated from St. Gabriel's High School here in Hazleton in 1964, St. John's University in New York in 1968. I spent several years on Wall Street before I moved out to the Hamptons on the east end of Long Island. I opened my own real estate business there, and then in 1976, I got into the nightclub business. I had a nightclub called Club Marrakesh in the Hamptons, and I also had one in Palm Beach, Florida. So at that time, I was living in the fast lane. Champagne, cocaine, lots of women, partying 24/7. That was my lifestyle. I was 20 years away from the church, away from my faith, when I had that experience of the first near-death experience in July 2nd, 1984. And of course, that experience ruined the partying for me. And it set me on a new path. I wasn't quite ready to accept it. I was actually angry with God for interfering with this great life that I was leading. And that resulted in a second near-death experience on November 30th, 1984, and that was at night at the Vietnam War Memorial in Washington, D.C. And as a result of that second experience, I was relieved, if you will, of my active alcoholism. It was a miracle in that that was the beginning of the end of my drinking and my drugging. And so I am now 28 years, just about coming up on 28 years of sobriety. And it's during that period of time that my mission, as I was shown during those 2 NDEs, began. And as you know, Sam, in the book, I talked about many future events that were going to happen in the world, geopolitical events, geophysical events, and also about what my future life was going to be like. And all of those events, pretty much in my own personal life, as well as events around the world, have been taking place just as I was shown. And I was shown that during that first near-death experience when my body was lying physically dead in an ambulance. I was in respiratory and/or cardiac arrest for approximately 1 hour and 6 minutes on that evening of July 2nd, when I was given all this information, if you will, and the gifts or blessings, if you will. And frankly, at the time, I thought of them more as a curse. I didn't accept this mission from God with open arms, somewhat reluctantly. But here we are, Sam, 28 years later, and I'm still on that mission. Everything that I was shown was going to happen is in the book, and they've been happening right along, including this understanding of this demonic plan, how Satan, if you will, was allowed to take over the world. And this is in what we call the final struggle of good versus evil.
In your messages, you always state that, when these messages are coming, and folks, again, to really have a better understanding of what Ned's trying to say, the book is called Fast Lane to Heaven, and you can get this, Google it, or bookstores have it. And also he has a number of, the best thing is to go to his website, because it's
endtimesdaily.com.
endtimesdaily.com. Heaven Help Us, Fast Lane to Heaven, on video, okay, and the home of the Dome of Deceptions. They're all related, and you'll understand when you read the book. I couldn't put the book down back in 2001, but in here is what he's talking about. Now the messages, because when you first came on, he's a wacko, he's a this, he's one, all the non-believers, because when you start touching people's hearts, and they get nervous, particularly the liberal press, okay, they'll blow you off as, etc., but they cannot deal with fact. We see how the country is going down. We see with people shooting people in the streets, murder, and we say to ourselves, well, oh my God, how could he shoot 12 people when we're murdering millions? I get a big kick out of the President of the United States, President Obama, when he's, and rightly so, when he's showing remorse, which he should, for people who were shot, and he should. But why is he showing remorse for the millions of people, millions of babies that he's allowing to get aborted? Okay, I don't see that remorse. I don't see him and his wife standing in front of something where all these unborn babies were massacred and pulled apart, and him saying, we should have remorse for them. What he wants to do, he wants to have more of that. Okay, and again, it's not a Democrat-Republican thing with me. It's just that, what do you think will happen if he gets elected President of the United States?
If Barack Obama is reelected?
Yeah.
Well, Sam, unfortunately, we're going to have more of the same. It's going to continue in the direction of the way the country is going. And really, it goes back again to even Paul Harvey's statement. He was pretty much saying how things were going to happen. And think about that, 1965. Since then, Barack Obama was born, raised, educated, and educated in a system where God has been taken out of our schools, out of our universities, out of our institutions, and out of our government. So he's a part of a generation that's been brainwashed into not understanding something that's really core to the very humanity that we are, and that is the sanctity of life itself.
We have about a minute before we go to break. Your messages. Explain to the audience how you get these messages.
Well, this is something.
Some people think that's.
What happened is on August 1st of 2005, Sam, I was actually up here in Hazleton, and I was praying and meditating before I was going to start writing on my computer, and this very powerful inspiration came over me from St. Michael the Archangel. Now, I might explain it. When I had the second near-death experience in November 30th of 1984, it was St. Michael who appeared to me in that experience in a very powerful way and imbued me with a message at that time. It was a message to the people of the United States of America. And it was a scathing attack on what our nation had become and was about to become because we turned away from God's plan for humanity. And in August 1st of 2005, when St. Michael again came to me through that inspiration, I began to type first his name and then a continuing message from him. And on that day, I also felt an inspiration from Jesus first and wrote his message, and then from Our Lady, the Blessed Mother, and I wrote her message. And since then, on the first of each and every day of the month, I receive an inspiration, if you will, from either Jesus or Mary or St. Michael. And these messages continually warn us about what is happening in this country as well as what's happening around the world because of our lack of morality, because of all the sins in the world, all of the terrible things that are happening, just as I was shown they were going to happen, are as a result of the sins of the world. And in the heavenly realms, the sin of humanity that is most grave is this failure to understand the sanctity of human life.
Folks, I'm talking to Ned Dougherty. EndTimesDaily.com is where you can go on there and you can get the messages. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. Don't get mad at me for having these shows. Some of you up there, I know Gary, are very upset because I know you're staunch Democrats and you're thinking I'm picking on the President of the United States. I'm not picking on him. In fact, he's in my prayers every day. I just don't like his stand on abortion, and we're going to be looking at more than that. And whether he's a Democrat or Republican, and when you take God out of a platform, it sort of worries me, and I am a Democrat, and it really bothers me. Now, Ned Dougherty is my guest. He wrote the book Fasting in Heaven. Folks, get the book, believe me. We've got about 3 minutes, Ned. I want you to take over and let our viewers know what your thoughts are.
Well, Sam, pretty much I've given you what my thoughts are. My thoughts are basically through the inspiration that I received. What I like to do is quote St. Michael the Archangel from the message that I received from him on August 1st of this year, just recently. This is part of the message, but it's the end of the message, and this is what he said through the inspiration that I received. The destruction of your nation as a republic or as a democracy has now been completed by your very own leaders and power brokers who conspired against the best interests of the citizenry for their own personal interests, which are materialism and greed and power over the rest of humanity. As you have been warned in the past, your nation will be reduced to rubble if you do not turn the tide of evil around and implement the plan of the Father in heaven to save not only your country, but all of humanity. You are therefore now in the end times when great and significant events take place that will result in a transformation of humanity for the better. But the beginning stages of these events consist of global, geophysical, and geopolitical events that are not pleasing for you. But the events that are taking place and that will continue to take place are necessary to purge the world of the evil that has gripped the world. Too often you have been asked to make a stand with your Father in heaven to turn the tide of humanity for the better. Since you have not responded in kind, the terrible events will continue to unfold. Your best position now is to take up spiritual arms with the Father in heaven so that you and your family members and friends will survive through the difficult times ahead. Fortunately for all of humanity, the Father in heaven has great mercy for his children, and he will support those who respond to his call. Therefore, once again, you are being called upon to turn your undivided allegiance to your Father in heaven so that you may become powerful spiritual warriors during these end times. And that's at the end of the message. And basically, Sam, I know this is difficult for a lot of people to understand or comprehend or accept. Our prayers are very powerful, and it is our prayers cooperating with the Father in heaven that are going to change things for the better. We really can't count on another 4 years of Barack Obama. We can't count on our leaders around the world who have been disappointing us time and time again. We have to rely on the Father in heaven and through His Son for changes to take place.
I just
for the
wonder
better.
how many times these people want to spit in God's face. How many times, and you have the Democrat platform forced to put God back into their platform and booed when it just like, I just can't. If I was a Catholic or if I was a Christian, Jewish, Protestant, I would have been in outrage. Biden should have been saying, wait a minute, this is not the way it should be going. He's a Catholic. Okay, there's a lot of good Christians. There was a minister who came up and said, wait a minute, we have to fight to put God back into our life. I feel sorry for people who don't have a religion, no matter what the religion is, because there are big voids in their lives and they don't understand it. They try to put physical things and that make them feel good, but there's always that void in their life. Ned, it's always a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, Sam.
Always goes too fast. Folks, the book is Fast Lane to Heaven. Go to his website, endtimesdaily.com, or go to our website, ssptv.com. We'll link you to that. We'll see you next time.